The Crescent Lufkin Shockforce G3 is here. In this video, we're going to talk about in what ways it differs from the G2 before it, and certain things that only you can decide. Let's talk about it. Two of the biggest complaints that people had with the original two generations of Shockforces were, number one, beyond 6 feet, there was way too much friction and traction on that tape measure. You almost have to manually retract the tape measure to get it to go back into its body and to get it going. Really at all. You guys know that most tape measures beyond 6 feet, there's at least some friction, and you might have to give it a little bit of a lift, barely any contact to really get it going. You know, that's the thing, most tape measures really wanted to just go with any little bit of input, whereas the original Shockforces, they wouldn't really go back at all, and would require a ton of manual input, which isn't ideal for a situation that requires a tape measure. Number two, when you dropped the original Shockforces onto their blade, they're easily bent. I'm not going to test that second theory out, whether they had remedied that with this one, but I will say that I'm glad to report that on the first issue of binding beyond 6 feet, they have resolved it with this tape measure. At 6 feet and beyond, it requires really no more minute input than any other tape measure, and it's really easy to get going. You're not going to really see it on camera, but let's just take this thing out to 6 feet really quick. There's a 6 feet. Heck, let's take it out to 7. Take it out to 8. Oop, I'm touching my ceiling. 8 feet. Look at that. Barely any. I was barely touching the tape measure at that point. They have solved the one thing that most people complain about, or at least one of the two things that people complain about the most. Like I said, I don't want to test it with this one, but even upon first impressions, I can kind of look at it and say, I don't know if the metal composition or the metallurgy is any different to make it more robust. Someone else will have to try that out, but this looks as though it's the exact same blade that they used on the original Shockforces, or at the very least the G2. I looked at the G2 Nite Eye and this one, they appear to be the exact same. So if someone else is going to try that out, I'll leave that up to them. But no more insane traction beyond 6 feet with the G3. Alright, these are the two blades side by side. The G3 is on my right, the G2 is on my left. You can tell right away that the numbers on the G3 are a bit larger than on the G2, and they also change the color. So apart from the blade itself just being a little bit glossier, let's just get away from the first few inches there, which have that plastic film over it. You guys have a little bit easier time deciphering what it is that I'm trying to convey here, but you see that this one has more gloss, this one doesn't. In direct sunlight, it does make somewhat of a difference. The numbers do get washed out towards the center, kind of like that. Whereas the G2, obviously, it's a bit more uniformed as far as glare, but the darker tape measure, because of the texture of the paint that they use, this one's just more gloss, this one's more matte or satin, creates a greater contrast. And as you guys can see as well, they did change the color from like a Ryobi green to a Monster Energy type of green. I'm being dead serious. So if you guys go to like Home Depot, for example, and you guys grab a Ryobi power tool, whether it's the box of the tool itself, and put a Monster Energy can next to it, you'll see the difference in color. It's exactly like that. So here are the backs of both tape measures. G3 is here, G2 is right here. The increased font size for the numbers is apparent on the G3. You guys can see more of that gloss effect as well with the glossier finish on the tape measure on the G3. Right now I have a light directly above the tape measures. We're almost directly above the tape measures. This is more or less simulating having the sun be directly over your shoulder. While there's a bit more glare on the G3, that's just a little bit more readily apparent with a more pronounced ray of sun beating down on it, for example, if it's over your shoulder, something like that. But if the sun's hidden away, if it's like a cloudy day and it's bright out, or even if the sun's just tucked away behind a building, you're getting shade, or in any situation where the sun isn't directly over your shoulder, I think Then I'm going to give the tip to the G3 just for its contrast. Just to show you guys something really quick though. That plastic film, not quite as centered on my particular unit on this G3, which kind of creates a lot of exposure on the right hand edge. On the left hand edge, it's very covered up very nicely. It just goes all the way over to this side, not so much on this side, which also creates a bit of a snag hazard. I'm trying to get that on camera for you guys. Which also creates a bit of a peeling and snag hazard. You guys can see that that is peeling ever so slightly on the top left, but I do think that is just my particular example. Will that have an effect over time? Who knows? Like I said, I think it's genuinely just this one unit that I have. I guess I just picked the one out of the bunch that had a little bit more off-centered of a plastic film than the other ones, but the only situation that I can see that being a little bit of a nuisance is, over time it might peel more, it'll expose those hash marks, but it's no different of a material at the end of the day than the whole rest of the tape measure, so I'm kind of indifferent to it, to be honest. At this point, we will further move into how the G2 and the G3 tape measures compare, side by side, and the changes implemented to the G3. You can see the graphical differences being a bit more readily apparent with the larger font, the more uniform font sizing, and the addition of white. The stud markers are the exact same size with the addition of white on the G3. You can also see that they've decided to go from conical to rectangular for the bumpers up front, which might be able to distribute shock a bit more evenly across something that is rectangular as opposed to conical. The lanyard loop on the G3 is simply better. Going from widthways to just traveling through the back bumper is going to keep a tighter knot on the lanyard. Moving on with appearance a little bit more, you guys can see from just these shots alone, the fit and finish on the G3 is superior. It's a bit better put together. They've also decided to move from all black on the Nite Eye series to orange and black to keep it a little bit more uniformed and streamlined with the rest of the Crescent Lufkin series of tape measures. Not just with this Nite Eye, they all have that same orange and black design now. Though that rectangular cutout in which the thumb switch travels is larger on the G2, the G3 switch itself is a little bit taller, which is good for gloved use. Here's something that you might have missed. There's an actual notch on the belt clip on the G3 now, which there's less surface area making contact with your belt, but there's an actual indexing point now. So there you have it. The Crescent Lufkin Shockforce G3 is here, for which I believe they implemented a lot of good changes and things that are objectively superior to the previous two generations of Shockforce, and some things that you might have to look at side by side and dictate for yourself as the end user whether these changes work for you or against you. Now, the good news is this: if you want to compare both of them side by side, at the time of this recording, the G2 is still in stock, though it is heavily clearanced. So make your way over to Lowe's, check them out side by side. And the G2s are as low as like $10. And the previous generation Control Series is down to like $5. And if you could get that tape measure for that price, and the Shockforce is above it, you're not going to be disappointed in any stretch of the imagination. It's been Husker.